Okay, Ancient Mahara here. What's one clearly one huge distinguishing factor between those who have codependency and people with narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder who also have codependency? Well, people with BPD, people with narcissistic personality disorder, both self, and not to the same degrees, false self is much more all there is, especially in narcissistic personality disorder. The false self is everything, because the self that emotionally arrested for people with narcissistic personality disorder as well at different age and stage of early childhood development is buried really deeply within all kinds of layers and layers and layers of very, very formidable infantile narcissistic defenses. And then people with BPD with codependency, to not as extreme an extent as people with narcissistic personality, have also this stronger false self presentation than people with just codependency, but not the narcissist. And that false self is so the infantile narcissistic defenses within BPD aren't as strong as they are in narcissistic personality disorder. And that's not the only difference between BPD and NPD. But in this video, I wanted to talk about and define what is one of the single most telltale signs or ways you can know that you are somebody with codependency and that you're not a narcissist or a borderline. It's harder to say with people with BPD, because a lot of people with BPD are going to work on that. They're going to go to treatment. They're going to recover. They're going to heal. Maybe many more aren't. So if you have codependency and you're wondering, so these narcissists have codependency and people with BPD have codependency, how can you know if you're not? And this is a pretty big sign, right? But you likely already know maybe you're codependent. You don't have BPD, don't have NPD. What's that number one sign that you have codependency and no cluster B? You have a false self, but it's not as strong as BPD or the stronger false self in NPD. But you also, as you become aware, you know that you have personal responsibility, or some people with codependency still trying to get to that personal responsibility to work on yourself, to try to find resolution and a healing recovery journey for your pain. That's the big difference right there. So that can happen with people with BPD as well. But it's a key difference between people with codependency and narcissists with codependency. People with codependency are going to seek recovery and healing sooner, if not later. People with codependency are a little bit more aware of themselves, even if you're a little bit, you're having that dysfunctional, unhealthy relationship to and with yourself to a degree, but not the same extent as somebody with BPD, or not like a person with narcissistic personality, where the false self is everything about the narcissist. So people with codependency have more, even when self-awareness isn't integrated, there's more self-awareness in people with codependency. More of a wondering what people with codependency tend to take too much responsibility for what happens with the borderline or the narcissist. Many people with BPD don't aren't taking any responsibility, and narcissists often, no, it's not even on the map, right? It's always just, they're transacting, they're not relating, narcissists. But people with codependency are really trying to relate. You're really trying to do the best that you can. So this really clear defining factor for people with codependency is that you are wanting to change. And you might be mired right now in, you might be the adult child of a narcissistic parent or a parent with BPD. You might still be having a hard time with that. But you're not like them exactly, right, at all. So that core sort of, to varying degrees, codependency that can be shared with people with codependency, people with BPD, people with NPD, isn't the exact same across all three. And so people with codependency, without BPD, without NPD, are definitely one way or another in their lives, you know yourself better. Even though you're not self-integrated, you don't know your whole self necessarily, because if you did, you'd be kinder to self. You'd have those, defined boundaries, and you wouldn't have got into a relationship with a cluster B. But all that said, people with codependency are able to heal, can come to the realization, if you haven't already, that you can change, you can heal, you can recover, you can start to break away from those unhealthy bonds. And yes, it's very painful in the beginning, but then to get into what I work with clients on, many different things, but inner child healing, the family of origin work and healing, and self-differentiation. And that really is working on integrating the self of people with codependency and being able to get out of that false self that is not as predominant in people with codependency, though it's there, as it is for people with BPD or people with NPD. So clearly, there are delineations, and this is one I just wanted to do sooner rather than later, to make it really, known and obvious to people with codependency who don't have BPD or NPD, that you are much more aware of yourself. You have empathy, you have the ability to, you're aware of others. And many people with codependency, though they might not respect themselves as much as they need to learn how to, or really be there for themselves and have that healthy relationship to and with self yet, you do respect others. And you largely try to respect boundaries. And many people with codependency are very successful in their careers and in other areas of their life. But in interpersonal relational dynamics that are going to mirror something from your childhood, that's a different story. That's where the codependent kryptonite is. And the codependent kryptonite is mainly, that real sort of vulnerability. I don't really want to call it a weakness, right? But that vulnerability that you need to know more about, that wounded inner child inside of you, that you might have some degree or other awareness of, is often, of course, that people with BPD and codependency don't have awareness of, but can gain it in their own process in healing, which is different from codependency without BPD or NPD. And what most narcissists will never seek to even think about. They especially the overt narcissist, they are not self-reflective at all. So people with codependency can be very self-reflective, and that's true whether or not you're yet at the point of realizing your responsibility and your part in the relational dynamic with the cluster B. So you're not responsible for what they did to you. But as a commenter said to my last video, you are responsible for allowing what they did to you. So that might sound like a fine line, but that's something that people with codependency need to come to understand, to be able to walk out of that, hurt and pain of it all, to at least getting into healing and recovery, where you can then be starting to move from, one place to starting to get your feet on the ground of being a survivor. So surviving, a BPD or NPD relationship and surviving the breakup and breaking that unhealthy bond. So people with codependency, everybody's different. Some people are much more codependent than others with codependency. Not every codependent is the same. And so it's really important to know that you're not, if you just have codependency and you've been involved, or you've had with somebody with NPD or BPD, or you have an NPD or BPD parent, that doesn't mean that within your codependency you're a borderline or narcissist at all. And the huge difference is going to be other areas of your life other strengths that you have, and then coming to this awareness of your personal responsibility, not only to get out of these kind of relationships and these dynamics and in your own healing and recovery journey, but also to take responsibility for yourself instead of everybody else, instead of that other person, whoever they are, the borderline, the narcissist, the parent, whatever, or the ex, or the not quite yet ex, or you're still in the relationship. Thing is, people with codependency have more awareness. Even where you might be lacking some awareness and you might be still abandoning yourself, that's what I'm saying in these videos recently also too, to people with codependency. What about you? You need to start looking at that much more. And guess what? People with codependency are quite capable of doing that. Many people have been through that journey. Some people just beginning, some people in the middle. And if you're not sure where you are in that journey, you know, I'm out here to work with you if I resonate with you. But this is a clear-cut difference between people with codependency and especially narcissists with codependency, because they're not going to be self-reflective. They're not going to get it. They don't care. They're sort of, the false self in them is way too strong for that, as are the narcissistic defenses. And really, people with codependency don't have those same narcissistic defenses. There can be strong infantile defenses, but not near as strong as BPD or narcissists. So I hope that helps a little bit today. I hope that gives you an idea that there are vast differences between people with codependency, people with BPD and codependency, narcissists who are also codependents. And again, I haven't really thought about it enough. I need to think about it more. I suppose there is some codependency to the overt narcissist, but again, it's more, I think, in narcissists who are the covert, shy, inverted, closeted, vulnerable narcissists. So anyway, that's one major difference between people with codependency and narcissists with codependency. And there are others. And so I think it's really important that everybody who's got, you know, who is a codependent understands that this is not something that one can heal in 2 months or 4 months or 6 months. That full recovery, I consider myself recovered, but not in the sense from codependency, but not in the sense that there aren't still awareness points that we need to maintain to be in that act of recovery from codependency, because codependency is also interwoven very tightly with culture, many different kind of cultures, but we've been inculcated with codependency and the codependent mindset and what that means by movies and music, etc., for all of our lives. So what I find, I just would like to share in my recovery from codependency, is that it's good. You know, I'm not codependent anymore actively or even passively. But the thing is, if we get around another toxic individual for whatever reason, so it might not be so, like in my case, there's nobody in my life who fits that, but there might be somebody that you have to deal with in some other capacity that one could kind of wonder if they have BPD or they might be a narcissist, or one might, if you have, you know, and have experience with this, then you might be able to kind of tell, but you don't need to label them, but you need to act accordingly. And that is with self-care, with boundaries, etc. So what the codependent really needs to know, you as a codependent, you're vastly different from a codependent who's got narcissistic personality disorder or BPD. But what you still have likely to learn, many people, various different places, right? But a lot of people with codependency still in these relationships or just getting out of them or still trying to heal and recover from cluster B relationships, and or with a parent or other relationship types as well as a significant other, is that, you know, you really need to learn how to tend to your own garden. Focus on yourself and learn how to nurture yourself, and more importantly, to work with somebody who can help you to heal the wounds of your inner child, which is the utmost, deepest level of, nurturing a part of self into self-integration, nurturing yourself and creating a loving, caring, kind relationship with and to yourself. That people with codependency lose that relationship to and with self because of adverse childhood experience. Take care.